ATACMS.
At the time of recording, the date is Sunday, the 17th of November, 2024, day 999 of the 3-day war. When you see this, it will be day 1000. 1000 days of this shit. 1000 days of Russia's imperialist ambitions being dashed all over Ukrainian fields. Finally, on day 999, US President Joe Biden has given permission for Ukraine to use ATACMS in strikes deep inside Russia. Thank the Lord. About fucking time. In the 1000 days since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, Russia's aggression has targeted schools, hospitals and homes across Ukraine with indiscriminate shelling. Just last week, Russian shells killed 14 civilians, including a 1-year-old child, and left 88 more injured. Thousands of other Ukrainian civilians have been killed since February 2022, and millions have been forced to flee. The true scale of devastation is difficult to quantify, but cities such as Mariupol, Bucha and Kharkiv bear the scars of a terror campaign designed to destabilize Ukraine. Russia's attacks on civilians, the systematic use of torture, forced deportations and weaponization of energy resources show complete disregard for human life. Recently, Russia has escalated its attacks on Ukrainian export infrastructure, blocking essential grain supplies to the global south and delaying aid to parts of the world that need it the most. When Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine in February 2022, the conventional wisdom was that the capital, Kyiv, would soon fall and the rest of the country wouldn't last long against a much larger enemy. Instead, it was that narrative that quickly collapsed. The Ukrainian army proved it could slow the advance of Russian forces, and if not drive them out completely, then with enough support from the West, at least forestall defeat. But nearly 3 years later, the outlook is again grim. Russia is expending huge amounts of weaponry and human life to make small but steady territorial gains to the nearly 1/5 of Ukraine it already controls. Ukraine, meanwhile, is struggling to minimise losses, maintain morale, and convince allies that with more military aid, it can turn the tide. After the war's first year, Russia and Ukraine essentially came to a standstill on the front line as the war rolled into its 3rd year. Then in February 2024, the town of Avdiivka fell to the Russians. With Ukraine low on ammunition, relentless Russian airstrikes created a major breach in Ukraine's defences in the Donetsk region. After fending off Moscow's offensive in the eastern Kharkiv region, Ukraine launched a surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region, giving Kyiv leverage in potential ceasefire negotiations, as it still holds on to the land in the region today. To keep its war going, Russia, like Ukraine, has turned to allies for help. Iran supplies Russia with drones and possibly missiles, and North Korea has sent ammunition and even troops, who have been deployed to Russia's Kursk region. Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed this year that 700,000 of his troops are fighting in Ukraine. Analysts say Putin would need a much larger force to accelerate Russia's advance, but that he is unlikely to mobilise more troops because it could stoke internal discontent. President Joe Biden has authorised Ukraine to use US-supplied missiles to strike deeper inside Russia, easing limitations on the longer-range weapons as Russia deploys thousands of North Korean troops to reinforce its war. According to a US official, and 3 other people familiar with the matter, the decision allowing Kyiv to use the Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, for attacks farther inside Russia comes as President Vladimir Putin positions North Korean troops along Ukraine's northern border to try to reclaim hundreds of miles of territory seized by Ukrainian forces. Zelensky and many of his Western supporters have been pressing Biden for months to allow Ukraine to strike military targets deeper inside Russia with Western-supplied missiles. saying the US ban has made it impossible for Ukraine to try to stop Russian attacks on its cities and electrical grids. Zelensky's statement came shortly after he posted a message of condolence on Telegram, following a Russian attack on a 9-story building that killed at least 8 people in the northern city of Sumy, 40 kilometers or 24 miles from the border with Russia. Russia also launched a massive drone and missile attack, described by officials as the largest in recent months, targeting energy infrastructure and killing civilians. The attack came as fears are mounting about Moscow's intentions to devastate Ukraine's power generation capacity before the winter.
Army tactical missile systems, cluster bombs, and Starstreak missiles. All these are weapons that Ukraine has been using since Russia invaded the country in early 2022.
The ballistic missiles developed by US aerospace and defence company Lockheed Martin have nearly double striking distance, up to 300 kilometers or 190 miles of most of the weapons in Ukraine's possession. They can carry out pinpoint attacks on airfields, ammunition stores, and strategic infrastructure. The United States supplied Ukraine with ATACMS last year, and they have been used to destroy military targets in Russian-occupied territories of Ukraine, but not on Russian soil. Ukraine has been asking its Western allies for longer-range weapons in order to alter the balance of power in the war where Russia is better resourced, and strike with precision air bases, supply depots, and communication centres hundreds of kilometres or miles over the border. It hopes the weapons would help blunt Russia's air power and weaken the supply lines it needs to launch daily strikes against Ukraine and to sustain its military ground offensive into Ukraine. The long-range missiles are likely to be used in response to North Korea's decision to send troops to support Kremlin forces. Pyongyang's troops are apparently being deployed to help the Russian army drive Ukrainian forces out of Russia's Kursk border region. It marks the second time that Washington has permitted Ukraine to use its weapon systems inside Russian territory. In May, after Russia's offensive into the Kharkiv region threatened to stretch Ukrainian forces thin, Biden permitted the use of the HIMARS system, with a range of 80 kilometers or 50 miles, to quell that advance. That decision helped Ukrainian soldiers stabilize the fight for a time by forcing Russian forces to pull back military assets. If strikes are allowed across all of Russia, they could significantly complicate Moscow's ability to respond to battlefield demands. If strikes are limited to the Kursk region, Russia could relocate its command centers and air units to nearby regions, blunting the effect of those logistical challenges. That would also mean many of the valuable targets Ukrainian officials have expressed desire to hit may still be beyond reach. The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, on August 31, 2024, documented at least 11,743 civilians killed and 24,614 wounded in Ukraine since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. The officials say actual figures are probably much higher, given the difficulty in verifying deaths and injuries, especially in areas such as the devastated port city of Mariupol that are now in Russian hands. Ukrainian prosecutors said 589 Ukrainian children had been killed by November 14, 2024. Though civilians have suffered greatly, the vast majority of the dead are soldiers. A rare all-out conventional war fought by two comparably equipped modern armies has been extraordinarily bloody. Many thousands have perished in intense fighting across heavily fortified front lines under relentless artillery fire, with tanks, armoured vehicles and infantry mounting assaults on trenches. Both sides closely guard tallies of their own military losses as national security secrets, and public estimates by Western countries based on intelligence reports vary widely, but most estimate hundreds of thousands of wounded and dead on both sides. Western countries believe Russia has suffered far worse casualties than Ukraine, sometimes losing more than 1,000 soldiers killed per day during periods of intense fighting in the east. But it is Ukraine, with around one-third of Russia's population, that is likely to be facing the more severe manpower shortages arising from the battles of attrition. Russia now occupies and claims to have annexed around a fifth of Ukraine, an area around the size of Greece. How much will they end up with? I guess that depends on us, and if we're willing to actually give Ukraine what it needs. Stop fucking about. Thank you all for watching.